And it's
Right.
provocative as heck.
It is provocative. He was angry.
Right.
And he was angry. It was over money, over relationships, over a lot of things that had been
Right.
going down.
Right.
And he said, so, hey, you know, I go away, you don't have me. They
What
build
a wonderful story.
What a wonderful story.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, a son of a bitch, you know.
Yeah.
And, you know, the thing is that I don't know if it really, he was referring, as you said, and I believe the story that he was working specifically, because nobody who is working with anybody to blow up a building is going to discuss it on the telephone.
Everything was submitted with a receipt.
Yeah.
And now it's questionable.
It's not questionable. It's like a little out of ordinary.
Okay.
You know.
All right. I don't think it was. If that's what you think, guys, fine. But I don't think that, because we was start already building the bomb, which is went off in the World Trade Center. It was built by supervision from the Bureau and the DA, and we was all informed about it, and we know that the bomb start to be built. By who? By your confidential informant. What a wonderful, great case.
Wow.
And then he put his head in the sand and said, oh, no, that's not true. He is son of a bitch. Okay, it's built with a different way in another place, and that's it.
All right.
No, and in fact, the real Paul,
And we all know that.
the proof of this new interpretation of it being the proper interpretation is the following: he would never have worn tapes during the course of this if there was even any hint that he was culpable. He wore
Right,
the
he's not
tapes because he
incriminating
was
himself.
afraid the FBI, if this second sting of the Sheik had gone wrong, the Day of Terror plot, he was afraid they were going to try and blame him.
Right.
So he was so mistrustful. Nancy Floyd was the only one he truly trusted, and so he became the linchpin witness in that plot. And he pointed something out to me that's very interesting. He said when he talks to the FBI, he says, "Who's the head of Al Qaeda?" And most of us would say Osama bin Laden, right, or al-Zawahiri. He said, no, the head of Al Qaeda is blind Sheikh Omar Abdul Rahman. He's the only one with the capability of issuing a religious fatwa. He's a graduate of Al Azhar University. There are only a few imams in the world that have the right. You have to be basically a PhD from Al Azhar, the oldest university in the Arab world, to issue that kind of religious edict. And bin Laden, of course, and Zawahiri are operational leaders of Al Qaeda. But the blind sheikh, and he's the only one that ever was successful in getting him on tape where he uttered these words where they were going to attack the U.S. military, and he was convicted of seditious conspiracy. So the blind, and by the way, I'm in my work, and I just want to, again,
I interviewed him, by the way, but I met...
You did?
Of course.
Sheik
it's on the
Rahman.
internet, yeah, Sheik Rahman.
I'll have that.
definitely.
I want to
In prison, yeah. You can get it. It's on my website.
I'll look for it.
Just go Sheik Rahman di Rienzo, and you can see it, and you can listen to it. And I have about a half-hour interview with him.
Great.
I don't think you could really draw a huge amount of information from it. I mean, he was basically... saying that his point of view is basically, I'm really not a bad guy. They're making me out to be a bad guy. I'm not fighting against America. I'm fighting against Egypt. He said, I'm not concerned with America. I'm concerned with what he said was Mubarak, the president of Egypt's torture, murder, in his words, Sheikh Rahman's words, of activists.
Thank you. Yeah.
And that's what he basically says. I mean, there's more things there, but he really drives out. You know, shortly after 9/11, I dug out these tapes happened earlier, right? And I dug them out after 9/11, and I played them. And interestingly, I got a phone call immediately from an Egyptian New Yorker, who just said, "I don't care what happened here was the most devastating thing I ever happened. I don't care what his justifications are for it.
Right.
Whatever happened, to hell with him." That's basically what Egyptian people came to me and said.
Right. And by the way, what Ahmad would say, but I have said, and he confirmed this with me last night. He said, I always say it's Egyptian in Al Qaeda around bin Laden. It's Dr. al-Zawahiri, Muhammad Atef, who was killed right after the invasion of Afghanistan. Ali Muhammad, principal character in this book, the spy.
So everybody says Saudi Arabia.
No. Al Qaeda is an Egyptian creation, and what happened was there was this worldwide fundraising network for the Office of Services for the Mujahideen, and it had offices all over the country, with the principal one at the Al Farouk Mosque on Atlantic Avenue in Brooklyn. And after the Soviets were dispatched, after the Soviets left Afghanistan, there were still millions of dollars coming in. So the question is, what do we do with it? Now, Abdullah Azzam, the Palestinian who founded the network, wanted it to go just purely to Afghanistan. And the blind sheikh and the Egyptians wanted it for the worldwide jihad because they, as Paul just said, they wanted to knock off Mubarak in Egypt. So there was an actual schism within this new group called Al-Qaeda, and they murdered Abdul Azan, and his sons were on their way to Juma Friday prayers in November of '99. They had a car bomb, and so it was like a mob takeover. And then once they had the network, the blind sheikh came to the United States. The Rabbi Kahani murder, I contend, was the first blood spilled by Al-Qaeda on American soil. And this is such a tightly organized group. If you go to peterlance.com, as you'll see below the screen, you can download, in the middle of this book, there's a 32-page timeline. It's like, I call it the Little Golden Book of Terror. And it lays out the story which begins with the murder of Anwar Sadat. And it's just a, if I do say so, fascinating look at not only the growth of radical Islam, which is the greatest threat we face since communism, but it's also how did the FBI drop the ball time after time after time. And this is a very limited universe. There are like 20 guys from bin Laden on down and 20 feds from Patrick Fitzgerald on down. And it's a limited universe of characters. And they kept intersecting for years and years. And ultimately, Ali Muhammad was the master spy. Ramzi Youssef was the bomber, the operations guy. And how this man intersected with Patrick Fitzgerald, I believe, is the reason Mr. Fitzgerald literally spent 20 months trying to keep my book from being published.
We're going to talk about that because I wanted to get to what's going on now. This is the background. I want to give the viewers an opportunity to know who we're talking to and why you're an expert right now, and how we met even, and that we've done shows before. Now, let's take it to now, because I know you've been sued by...
No, he didn't. He threatened to sue.
He threatened to sue.
Yeah,
okay.
He only threatened.
I'm glad he didn't sue you. But I saw the
threatened.
newspaper article. It seemed like it was a pretty serious threat.
Well, in fact, he sent his first. Understand who we're talking about. We're talking about Patrick Fitzgerald, the U.S. attorney in Chicago who indicted Governor Blagojevich, convicted Governor Ryan, convicted Conrad Black. He's a stellar prosecutor, probably the most powerful in America. Was for many years what I call the general in the war on terror. He ran first co-head and then head of the organized crime and terrorism units in the U.S. Attorney Office for the Southern District, which is the bin Laden Office of Origin. So his job was to try and get an indictment per President Clinton of Osama bin Laden. And he had an elite squad called I-49 with agents Jack Clunan, Dan Coleman, Frank Pellegrino, Harlan Bell, some of the best agents in New York. And they became expert. Now, in the middle of all this, as it turns out, they had as an informant, beginning on the West Coast in '92, this fellow named Ali Muhammad. Ali Muhammad was an ex-Egyptian army officer. Unlike Salem, he was a bad officer who wished the United States nothing but harm. He was thrown out of the Egyptian military. It was his unit that murdered Sadat. He then was adopted by this Dr. Ayman al-Zawahiri, the gentleman with the little goatee and the glasses, who was the number two, who founded Al-Qaeda with bin Laden. He then went to the CIA, briefly infiltrated a mosque in Hamburg for the CIA in 1984, supposedly blew his cover, and gets on a watch list, and then mysteriously gets past the watch list. He's on a plane coming into America where he meets a woman named Linda Sanchez, seduces her on the plane, gets married at a drive-through wedding chapel in Reno, Nevada 6 weeks later. Now he's living in Silicon Valley in her house. All of this is in this timeline at peterlance.com. And now, but here's the stunner. He enlists in the U.S. Army, doesn't go in as an officer candidate, even though he's an officer. He goes in under and becomes an enlisted man, ends up at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, where the elite Green Beret officers train. And on weekends, he's coming to New York, where he trains the original Trade Center bombing cell, this Day of Terror cell that Salem ultimately brought down. And he then moves bin Laden's entire entourage from Afghanistan to Khartoum. He trains Osama's personal bodyguard in his house in the Sudan. He's the guy who wrote the manual on terror that they found in Manchester, England. You can download at smokinggun.com.
And this is while he's in the U.S. military.
And this is, well, part of this is then, and then he becomes an FBI informant from 92 on. And he meets Andrew McCarthy, the assistant U.S. attorney who's prosecuting the Day of Terror. He flies to California. And
the Day of Terror here in New York, they were going to bomb a whole bunch of things all at once.
They were going to blow up the bridges and tunnels. They were going to try and blow up the UN, 26 Federal Plaza.
I don't know, most people weren't even born then, maybe half the people listening, but they talked, back in those days, it was the witch's brew. They were caught mixing.
Yeah,
the
exactly. That's the term they use. Very good,
witches,
Paul.
I remember.
They set up a
I wasn't there, but
operation.
I was around at the time.